They held a grand ribbon cutting on my land, until the county governor arrived and asked the one question that destroyed their plan. Who owns this property? I inherited 42 acres from my grandfather, quiet land on the edge of a booming county. I kept it untouched, no fences, just open fields and a worn-out barn. To the HOA next door, it looked like unused land. Me, it was home. I left for work out of state for 6 months. When I returned, something was very wrong. Driving down the old dirt road, I saw a giant red ribbon crowd of neighborhood residents, a banner reading HOA expansion ceremony, and a freshly paved sidewalk leading directly onto my land. They had set up a full event right in the middle of my property. Chairs, speakers, cameras, everything. I stepped out of my truck, stunned. Nobody even noticed me. The sun hadn't even reached its highest point when I stepped out onto my porch, coffee in hand, expecting a quiet morning. What I got instead was a portable stage, right in the middle of my lawn. Not near it. Not beside it. Not accidentally overlapping it. Dead center. A silver-gray platform, 4 feet high, legs drilled directly into the soil I had personally maintained for years. Black wires ran across my grass like veins, powering speakers, lights, and a podium wrapped in a ridiculous bow, as if this whole thing were some kind of celebration. A banner stretched across the front. HOA Community Park groundbreaking ceremony. I blinked once, twice, a third time. Karen, the reigning queen of pettiness, the HOA president who treated the neighborhood like her personal kingdom, adjusted her blazer and stepped up to the podium. She had that smile. The type of smile people wear right before announcing a rule that ruins everyone's week. She tapped the microphone. Tap, tap. "Good morning, neighbors," she chirped, voice overly sweet as though she hadn't just trespassed onto private property. "Today marks a historic moment for our community." People gathered around clapped politely, unaware of the land beneath their feet. Karen continued, packing slowly across the stage like a politician rehearsing for a debate she already planned to win. "After years of careful planning," she said, "and after successfully negotiating certain acquisitions, the HOA is proud to announce the development of our brand new community park." The crowd cheered, but that one word kept echoing in my head, floating above the applause like an alarm bell. Acquire. Acquire what? Acquire from who? I leaned forward, narrowing my eyes. Karen lifted a long, rolled-up blueprint from the table beside her. She unfurled it dramatically, snapping it open so fast the wind almost ripped it from her hands. "This," she declared proudly, "is the official layout of the park. It will feature a playground, walking paths, a gazebo, oh, and of course, a community garden maintained by volunteers." People oohed. People awed. But then, right there on the blueprint, proudly highlighted in bright yellow, was the parcel number I knew better than my own phone number. My land. Not the HOA. Not communal space. Not shared property. Mine. Legally. Officially. Recorded with the county. And somehow, the HOA had built a stage on it without my consent. My jaw tightened. Karen kept speaking, oblivious to the heat rising behind my eyes. "We've worked tirelessly to ensure this land is put to good use," she continued, gesturing at the space under her feet. "This area has been underutilized for far too long. The community deserves better, something beautiful, something functional, something everyone can enjoy." She smiled again, but this time it wasn't sweet. It wasn't friendly. It wasn't even polite. It was triumph. A smile you use when you think you've already won. I stepped closer, arms crossed, watching her like she was a thief delivering a speech inside the house she just robbed. Karen pressed a button on the podium. Behind her, a giant screen flickered to life, showing a 3D rendering of the future park, complete with parents pushing strollers, kids running freely, dogs rolling in grass I had mowed with my own 2 hands. "This land," she repeated, "was obtained by the HOA earlier this year due to a clerical oversight not being challenged in time." The audience nodded, not understanding what she meant. But I understood perfectly. This wasn't a simple misunderstanding. This wasn't a misprint. This wasn't an oversight. This was a land grab. A deliberate, calculated, dishonestly executed attempt to seize my property and repurpose it as a trophy. A few HOA board members clapped harder than necessary, probably relieved Karen had finally pulled off whatever scheme she had been cooking. My fingers curled into fists. Karen continued, now walking to stage left, letting the sun hit her hair just right, an intentional move because everything Karen did was intentional. "This is a major milestone for our HOA," she announced boldly, "and it serves as a reminder that when we work together, nothing is impossible." The crowd applauded once more. My pulse thumped in my ears. The stage, the microphone, the banners, the blueprint. None of this had happened overnight. This wasn't spontaneous. This was planned, budgeted, approved, executed, all without a single letter, email, notice, or conversation with me. They didn't think I'd find out until it was too late. Karen raised her hands dramatically. "And now, to celebrate this moment, we will begin with a ceremonial ribbon cutting, right here on our new parkland." Parkland. She said it with pride. I heard it like a challenge. My jaw locked so tight it hurt. She turned her back to me, signaling one of the board members to bring over a giant pair of novelty scissors, the kind used for grand openings of new buildings or corporate ribbon-cutting events. People pulled out their phones to record. I stepped forward. The grass crunched beneath my steps. Not HOA grass. Not community grass. My grass. And with each step, the truth settled deeper, heavier, colder. This was Karen being annoying. This wasn't Karen pushing her luck. This wasn't Karen making another rule. This was Karen crossing a line she couldn't uncross. She had touched something sacred. My land. My boundary. My rights. She had built a stage over my property like it belonged to her. She had announced a park like she owned it. She had smiled like she had already won the war. But what Karen didn't know, what she couldn't possibly have predicted, was that her biggest mistake wasn't stealing my land. It was doing it in public, in front of witnesses, on camera, with documents I could and would tear apart piece by piece. Her speech wasn't the beginning of a park. It was the beginning of her downfall, and she had no idea. I didn't interrupt, didn't shout, didn't even step forward. People expected outrage. They expected a confrontation. They expected me to storm the stage and tear down the banners with my bare hands. But that's not how you win against people like Karen. Not by force. Not by noise. Not by anger. You win by letting them hang themselves with their own rope. So instead of reacting, I reached into my pocket, unlocked my phone, and hit record. The moment the camera started rolling, I felt my heartbeat slow. My frustration settled like dust in sunlight. My mind sharpened. Karen raised the novelty scissors high above her head, soaking in the attention like she was opening a new hospital wing instead of trespassing on private property. Around her, the HOA board members lined up like loyal foot soldiers, Dale with his arms crossed smugly, Cynthia fixing her hair for the drone camera, and Greg pretending he had anything to do with this project, besides signing forms he didn't read. The crowd clapped politely, unaware that every cheer, every photo, every second was turning into evidence. The drone buzzed overhead like a mechanical mosquito, filming from every angle. Whoever hired it must have paid extra for stabilization and 4K quality. Good. High-resolution proof is the best kind. Karen cleared her throat, lifting her chin proudly. On behalf of the HOA, she declared, we officially break ground on our new community park. The scissors closed with a loud snip, dramatic enough to trigger another round of applause. A ribbon dropped. Confetti cannons popped. Children squealed in delight. A few parents whistled. And the entire ceremony unfolded. On my land. On land I had mowed. On land I had paid taxes on. On land I had owned longer than Karen had lived in this state. Every smile they flashed was a photograph. Every sentence spoken into the microphone was an admission. Every drone shot was a time-stamped confession. The board members stepped off the stage and began shaking hands with residents. It's about time we got a park, one woman said. This is going to raise home values, another added. Finally, somewhere for my kids to play, a father said. Meanwhile, my camera caught everything. Every footprint sinking into my soil. Every HOA official signing papers on my folding table, the one they had dragged out without asking. Every drone angle showing the exact property line they were trespassing on. Karen strutted across the stage like a queen surveying her kingdom. She truly believed she had pulled off the greatest power move the HOA had ever seen. But her victory lap only made it easier. I zoomed in, capturing the moment she posed with the board, right in front of a marker stake with my parcel number printed on it. Perfect. I didn't need to say a word. Behind me, a few neighbors whispered, "Isn't this his land?" I thought this was an HOA property. No, Karen said the HOA acquired it. Really, when? None of them realized they were standing on the biggest misunderstanding or manipulation of the year. And I stayed silent. Silence is terrifying to people like Karen. Silence means strategy. Silence means confidence. Silence means a trap is already set. She glanced over for a half second, expecting to see me fuming, packing, causing a scene. Instead, I smiled. A slow, controlled, calm smile that didn't match the chaos she expected. Her expression twitched. Just enough to show she noticed. Just enough to reveal a spark of uncertainty. Good. The ceremony continued. Kids ran under the ribbon pieces. Parents took pictures in front of the stage. Dale tried to act important by giving reporters quotes they didn't ask for. Then came the shovel moment. The HOA always exaggerated everything, so of course this wasn't just a shovel. It was a giant gold-painted ceremonial shovel, engraved with the words, HOA Park, a community legacy. They might as well have engraved Evidence Exhibit A on it. Karen planted the shovel into the ground, my ground, pressing her heel into the soil as if she were claiming a new territory for her empire. Flashlights popped. Phones recorded. Even the drone dipped lower for a dramatic shot. Great. More footage. I framed the shot perfectly. Karen's hand on the shovel. The board surrounding her. The banner in the background. My property stake sitting quietly at the edge of the frame. All of it beautifully incriminating. The crowd clapped again as she lifted a small mound of dirt. It was symbolic. It was ceremonial. It was also technically tampering with privately owned land. I couldn't have asked for better. As the applause faded, Karen stood taller, looking around the crowd with a satisfied smirk. She thought she had won. She thought she had claimed something permanent. She thought I was powerless. I slipped my phone into my pocket and took a deep breath of the crisp morning air. The funny thing about people who break rules publicly is that they don't realize how much cleaner the case becomes. No ambiguity. No hearsay. No maybe I misunderstood. Just facts. Recorded. Time-stamped. Undeniable. The ceremony dragged on for another 20 minutes. Speeches. Self-congratulations. Dale waving the shovel around like he dug a ditch in his life. Children being handed balloons with the HOA logo on them. But eventually, the music faded, the drone landed, and the board members stepped off the stage. Karen finally approached me, expecting gratitude or surrender. "Isn't it wonderful?" she said, breathless from excitement. "Our community is moving forward." I nodded slowly. It was enlightening. She blinked, unsure how to interpret that. "Are you upset?" she asked, trying to sound casual but failing. "Not at all," I said, smiling again. In fact, I was thrilled. Because now they had no escape route. No excuses. No denials. They had built a public ceremony on private land. And I had recorded every beautiful second. As Karen walked away, trying to convince herself she still had control, I looked out across the field of footprints and trampled confetti. Then I whispered, to no one in particular, "Perfect." Because it was. The moment the last HOA board member stepped off my grass, I took one long breath, exhaled slowly, and slipped my phone back into my pocket, full of recordings, photos, angle shots, and every shred of evidence I needed. But evidence alone doesn't win wars. Connections do. And I had the best one possible. I walked back toward my porch, each footstep steady, controlled. My neighbors still lingered behind, gossiping, snapping photos in front of the ribbon remnants, unaware they were trespassing on private property. The stage crew had begun unplugging lights, rolling up cables, and packing away their equipment like they hadn't just participated in a felony-level mistake. Karen was off to the side, talking to Cynthia and Dale, laughing like she had already won whatever game she believed she was playing. I didn't waste a second. I pulled out my phone again, this time not to record but to call someone. Someone with real authority. Someone who wouldn't hesitate. Someone who loved this land almost as much as I did. My best friend since the age of 9. Daniel Hayes, County Governor. Not assistant, not committee member, not advisor. Governor. I tapped his name. The phone rang once. He picked up before the second ring. "Hey," he said, casual and warm like always. "You never call this early. What's up?" I glanced at the stage, drilled into my ground. "You near your office?" "Just left," he said. "Headed out with security. Why?" "You might want to reroute." His tone shifted, not alarmed but alert. "Serious?" "Talk to me." I walked toward the boundary stake the HOA had pretended didn't exist and placed my hand on it. "The HOA just held a full ribbon-cutting ceremony," I said calmly, "on my land." Silence. A full second. Then another. Then laughter. Not small laughter. Not polite laughter. "No." Daniel howled. "You're joking," he said, still laughing. "I recorded the whole thing." He laughed even harder. "They held a ribbon cutting on your land." He paused, voice rising. "Wait like a real one, stage, cameras, press. Drone speeches, confetti, the whole circus." Another long, unrestrained burst of laughter. "Unbelievable," he managed. "Absolutely unbelievable." I heard rustling on his end, papers being shoved aside, car doors opening, boots hitting pavement. Then his voice hardened, the laughter fatting into something sharper, colder. "All right," he said, "we're handling this personally." "Daniel." No, I'm already in the car. Send me the location. I'll be there in 15. 15. He usually needed at least 30 to get across town with security. You don't need to rush, I said lightly. Oh, I absolutely do, he replied, because I want to be there before they pack up their equipment and slither away pretending none of this happened. For a moment, I imagined Corinne's face when Daniel walked onto the property. The HOA's expressions. The sudden realization that they had crossed a line not just illegally, but politically. Daniel's voice softened as he continued. You remember the creek behind your property? Of course I do. We grew up there, building tiny rafts, skipping stones, trying to catch fish with our bare hands, laughing till sunset while our parents yelled from the porch to come home for dinner. That land, he said, was basically our childhood. No way I'm letting someone violate it. He wasn't just coming as a governor. He was coming as my oldest friend. I knew you, understand, I said. Understand, he snorted. Buddy, I've been waiting years for someone to give me a reason to look into that HOA. They've been towing legal lines for too long. Of course he knew. Of course he'd heard things. Complaints. Reports. Minor violations that slipped through the cracks. He continued, voice firm. Text me your GPS pin, and don't let anyone leave. I smiled. Oh, they're not leaving. I looked out over the lawn. The stage crew was still tightening bolts, preparing to lift the platform. Dale was taking selfies with the golden shovel like a child showing off a toy. Cynthia was narrating the ceremony for her Facebook Live, acting like she had personally built the park. Corinne looked proud enough to float. Good. Let them settle in. Let them get comfortable. Because the moment Daniel arrived, comfort would turn to chaos. I started walking toward the ceremony crowd again, slow and quiet, just observing. People still clapped occasionally, as if applause might magically produce a park. A few approached Corinne for photos. She smiled wide, soaking in the admiration, completely unaware that the biggest storm of her HOA career was already on its way. Another neighbor approached me. So what do you think of the park? He asked. I glanced around at the stage, the trampled grass, the confetti still drifting in the breeze. It's going to be very temporary, I said. He laughed, thinking I was joking. But I meant every word. I heard the faint sound of engines approaching in the distance, sirens off, but unmistakable. Government vehicles. Security escorts. They were still far, but close enough for my chest to tighten with anticipation. I sent Daniel my GPS pin. Seconds later, 3 dots appeared. He was already replying. 5 minutes. 5 minutes. That meant he was speeding. I pocketed my phone and watched as Corinne lifted her hands again to gather attention. Everyone, before we wrap up, I want to thank you all for trusting the HOA to manage this new area. Her voice droned on, her tone proud, her hands gesturing dramatically toward things she didn't own. I watched the horizon behind her. A black SUV appeared first. Then another. Then a county vehicle. All turning down the neighborhood street. Slow. Controlled. Official. Corinne had no idea. She finished her speech with a wide grin, raising both hands as if receiving applause she didn't deserve. And the timing couldn't have been more beautiful. The SUV caravan stopped at the end of my driveway. Security officers stepped out first. Then the rear door opened. Daniel stepped out. Governor Hayes. My childhood friend. 6 feet of calm authority, paired with the kind of presence that made people stand straighter without realizing why. He removed his sunglasses slowly, scanning the entire scene. The stage. The banners. The golden shovel. The people. Then his eyes landed on the ground beneath them. He recognized it instantly. His gaze hardened. He looked like a man walking into a courtroom, not a neighborhood. Karen finally noticed the entourage and blinked rapidly, confused. Who is that?" she whispered to Dale. I smiled. This was about to get very, very interesting. Karen nearly exploded when she saw the black SUV roll up, sleek, dark, government-plated, and unmistakably official. The crowd reacted instantly. Conversations died mid-sentence. Parents pulled their kids closer. HOA board members straightened their shirts like children about to be scolded. The celebration atmosphere evaporated faster than spilled gasoline in the sun. The SUV came to a slow, deliberate stop at the edge of my driveway. Doors opened in perfect sequence. First, the two security officers stepping out with quiet authority, scanning the area with practiced eyes. Then finally, the rear door. And out stepped Governor Daniel Hayes. Sunglasses, clipboard, calm stride, the kind of presence that made even confident people shrink an inch. Karen's smile twitched so violently she looked like she had swallowed a bee. She smoothed her blazer with both hands, trying to recover her posture, then marched forward with a wide, artificial grin plastered across her face. "Good morning, what a surprise," she chirped, voice higher than usual, too high. Fake high. Governor Hayes didn't speed up or slow down. He simply walked toward her, his every step measured, scanning the scene, the stage, the banners, the ceremonial shovel, the trampled grass, the crowd, the confetti still drifting like sad snowflakes. And me. He gave me the smallest nod, a silent, shared understanding. Then he turned to Karen. "Morning," he said, crisp and professional. "I'm here for the land use inspection." Those 5 words hit the HOA board like a brick through stained glass. Dale stiffened. Cynthia gasped. Greg nearly dropped the clipboard he was pretending to review. Land use inspection," Karen repeated, her smile wobbling. "Yes," Daniel said, flipping one of his pages casually. "Submitted a request for land development approval. The county received it yesterday." Her face drained of color. "Yesterday, but the park is what brings me here." His tone was polite but sharp enough to slice her excuses before she even formed them. Karen scrambled for words. We've been planning this project for months." "Interesting," Daniel said, "because according to county records, this land is not registered to the HOA. Karen laughed, tight, nervous, trembling. "Well, yes, you see, it's complicated. It's being transitioned. The HOA board approved the acquisition process." Daniel raised one eyebrow, slowly, deliberately. The kind of eyebrow raise that meant, "That's a lie, try again." "Is that so?" he asked. Karen swallowed hard. "Why, yes. We acquired this section as part of our community improvement expansion." Daniel glanced down at his clipboard, flipping a page with a calmness that felt more dangerous than any raised voice. "Whose land?" he asked casually, almost lightly. "Is this exactly?" Karen froze completely. She looked from Daniel to the crowd, to the stage, to the stake with my parcel number, to me, then back to Daniel. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out, not a whisper, not a lie, not a breath, just panic. Daniel let the silence stretch, long enough for everyone to feel it in their bones, long enough for every neighbor to realize something was very, very wrong. "Well," Daniel asked again, tone still polite. "Whose land is this?" Karen's voice finally emerged, a squeaky, fragile sound. "It's community affiliated with the HOA, so technically, Daniel repeated, stepping forward just half an inch, enough to make her shrink back. "Technically," he continued, "this parcel is privately owned. Title is active. Taxes are current. No transfer request has ever been submitted. No approval has ever been granted. No ownership change has ever occurred." The HOA members behind her looked like a row of dominoes about to collapse. Daniel tapped his clipboard. "Which means this ribbon-cutting ceremony," he pointed at the stage, "is taking place on private property." Karen tried to smile again. It failed. Miserably. "Governor Hayes, I'm sure this is just a small misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding," Daniel repeated. "Is that what you call holding a public ceremony on someone else's land without authorization?" Her hands fluttered like startled birds. Technically we thought." "Technically," Daniel said, lowering his sunglasses just enough for her to see his eyes, "you didn't think at all." A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd. The stage crew froze mid-step. Even the drone operator stopped filming. Daniel turned away from Corinne and addressed the residents. For clarity, this land does not belong to the HOA. This is privately owned, protected property. Any attempts to claim, alter, or develop it without consent constitute a violation of county law and property rights. Corinne looked like she might faint. Dale looked like he wanted to evaporate. Cynthia whispered, "Oh my God," under her breath. Daniel continued, voice steady as stone. And any individual or group responsible for unauthorized development, he looked directly at Karen, will be held accountable. Corinne's lips quivered. "Governor, please." "We didn't know. You didn't verify," Daniel corrected. "You acted without documentation, and now you've performed a public ceremony on land you do not own." He looked at me again, this time with the faintest smirk, a smirk that said, "They're done." Then he turned back to Corinne. "So, before we proceed, let me repeat my question slowly." He stepped closer. "Whose land is this?" Corinne's throat bobbed as she swallowed. She finally whispered the truth everyone was waiting for. "His." She lifted one shaky hand and pointed at me. The crowd gasped. Phones lifted. Cameras rolled. Even the wind seemed to pause. Daniel nodded. "Correct." Then he closed his clipboard with a soft snap, the quietest yet loudest sound of the entire morning. "Good," he said. "Now we can begin." And just like that, everything changed. The world seemed to stop the moment Daniel said those 4 words. "This man owns it." No dramatic music. No thunder. Just silence, pure, heavy, suffocating silence. It rolled through the crowd like a slow-moving wave. A few people gasped aloud. Others clutched their phones tighter. One kid actually dropped his balloon and watched it drift away without caring. Every single face in the crowd shifted, from excitement to confusion to horror. Corinne stood frozen. Her smile melted off her face like wax under a flame. Her hands, previously folded proudly in front of her, slowly unfolded and fell uselessly to her sides. Daniel didn't move. Didn't blink. Didn't even look at her. He simply repeated himself, this time louder. "This is private land." A murmur rippled through the crowd, nervous, questioning, sharp. The HOA board members looked like a row of statues, each one paler than the next. Dale swallowed so hard the sound seemed to echo. Cynthia covered her mouth with both hands, eyes darting like she was trying to find an exit. Greg stared straight ahead, rigid, as if hopping stillness would make him invisible. Daniel flipped a page on his clipboard, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "Unauthorized development." Another page flip. "Construction without a permit." Another flip. "Illegal use of county funds." The final flip. "And trespassing." Each accusation fell into the air like a hammer striking an anvil. Corinne lurched forward, voice cracking. "We were told it was abandoned." The crowd recoiled, not just from the lie, but from how fast it came out, as if she had rehearsed it. I stepped forward then, slowly, deliberately. The grass crunched under my shoes, the same grass Corinne had claimed belonged to the HOA just an hour ago. "It wasn't abandoned," I said, my voice steady and loud enough for everyone to hear. I stopped a few feet in front of the stage, the same stage they drilled into my property, the same stage they had celebrated their imaginary victory on. "It was mine," I said, "all of it, and you knew." Corinne shook her head violently. No, that's not, we didn't, you never." But Daniel cut her off. "Mrs. Cartwright," he said, stepping toward her, "records show that the HOA received a boundary clarification notice 3 months ago. The county sent an official map. Your signature acknowledges receipt." Her face drained. "Colorless. Lifeless." He continued, "Which means you knew exactly where the property line was. You knew this land wasn't yours, and yet you proceeded anyway." The silence hardened again, thicker than before, loaded with guilt, embarrassment, outrage, and fear. A few neighbors backed away from Corinne, as if her guilt were contagious. The parents who had applauded earlier now whispered uneasily among themselves. One older neighbor muttered, "I knew something was off. She always pushes things too far." Another whispered, "She lied. She actually lied about owning the land." Daniel wasn't done. "And for the record," he added, "holding a public ceremony on private land without permission is not an accident. It is a deliberate violation." Corinne's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping on a dock. We didn't use county funds," she stammered. Daniel lifted his clipboard like a judge, raising a verdict. "Receipts from your treasurer indicate otherwise." Cynthia flinched. She looked down at the ground, hands trembling, as if the paper trail were physically pulling her down. Dale took a step backward, then another. He looked like he was debating sprinting to his car. Daniel's gaze snapped to him. "Don't even think about it." Dale froze. The crowd was so silent you could hear confetti pieces rolling across the grass. I took another step forward. "You put a stage on my land. You dug holes for your posts. You flew a drone over my property. You held a ceremony on ground you don't own." I looked directly at Corinne. "And you told everyone here it belonged to the HOA." She whispered, "We were misinformed." "No," I said calmly, "you were caught." Corinne's breathing hitched. Her eyes darted everywhere, toward the stage crew, toward the HOA board, toward the bewildered neighbors, toward the ground, as if she were searching for a version of reality where this wasn't happening. But Daniel wasn't finished. "Your actions," he said, "aren't just violations of local property law. They fall under county-level review, and they warrant an immediate investigation." A gasp rippled through the crowd again. An investigation. A real one. Not a slap on the wrist. Not a warning letter. Corinne swayed like she might collapse. Cynthia whispered to her, "Corinne, what did you do?" Corinne ignored her, staring at me with a mixture of anger and fear, like I had somehow orchestrated all this, like I was the villain for defending my own land. Daniel stepped aside slightly, motioning to the stage behind her. "And this entire structure," he said, turning to the county officers, "document it, photograph everything, measurements, damage to the land, record exact placement, all of it." The officers got to work immediately. Corinne's eyes widened. Wait, what are they doing?" "They're doing," Daniel said, "what you should have done before driving posts into land that didn't belong to you." Dale rubbed his face, muttering, "This is bad, this is really bad." Cynthia was near tears. "Corinne, he's the governor, this isn't going away." Corinne finally snapped, pointing a shaking finger at me. You're doing this to humiliate me." I raised an eyebrow. "You humiliated yourself." More murmurs from the crowd. "Yes," someone said. "She did. This is insane. Why did she think she could get away with this?" Corinne turned back to the governor, desperate now. "We can fix this. We can negotiate. We can." Daniel shook his head. "The time for negotiation ended the moment you cut that ribbon." Silence. Dead, chilling silence. Even the wind stopped. Governor Hayes then stepped toward me, placing a firm hand on my shoulder. "This land," he said clearly, "belongs to him, and any further decisions will go through him." Corinne's knees buckled slightly. The board looked defeated. The neighbors looked stunned. The stage crew stood in awkward stillness. And I felt calm, powerful, steady. Because for the first time since this mess started, the truth wasn't whispered, debated, or doubted. It was declared. Publicly. Undeniably. Beautifully. Corinne looked up at me, eyes full of disbelief, panic, and something else, something she wasn't used to feeling. Powerlessness. This was the moment everything shifted. The moment she realized she wasn't in control. She never had been. And now, everyone knew it. County officials didn't walk onto the scene. They descended. Clipboards out, cameras rolling. 2 survey trucks pulling up the curb like they'd been waiting for this moment. The HOA board froze in place as a team of county inspectors swept across the new park with the precision of a crime scene unit. Every official wore the same expression, a blend of irritation and disbelief, like they couldn't decide whether to laugh or find someone on the spot. The first thing they targeted was the stage. An inspector crouched, measured the posts, tapped them with the end of his pen and sighed. This is built directly over a property boundary marker. He pointed to the bright orange flag, half buried under a plastic folding chair. Karen pretended not to see it. Minutes later, the county ordered the stage dismantled immediately. 2 workers, men the HOA had hired just that morning, were forced to start tearing apart the plywood while the crowd watched in complete silence. Every crack of wood sounded like another nail in the HOA's coffin. Next came the sidewalk. A concrete strip the HOA poured just 2 days earlier, cutting across my lawn like a scar. They'd even added little solar lights along the edge, trying to make it look official. A county engineer pointed at it with a laser measurer. This is entirely on private land. No permit, non-compliant, remove it. Karen opened her mouth to protest. We built it as a community improvement. It's just a pathway. The engineer didn't even look at her. It's illegal, it comes out. The HOA volunteers who had proudly installed it last week now stared at the ground like children caught drawing on walls. One of them whispered, "I told her to double-check the boundaries." Another replied, "She said she didn't need to." By then, the drones overhead began buzzing lower, confused about the commotion. One of the county tech officers pointed at them like he was calling out invading aircraft. Ground those immediately. They're recording on private property without consent. The drone operators, 2 teenagers hired to capture the historic ceremony, hurriedly landed them. One of the drones clipped a tree on the way down and crashed into the grass. A kid walked over, picked up the wreckage, and muttered, "I'm not getting paid enough for this." But the real damage began when the county officials moved on to the people. One by one, HOA board members were pulled aside. They were questioned, measured, evaluated, documented. Every board member had to sign a statement acknowledging they had no proof of ownership, no transfer documents, and no lawful right to hold a public event on my land. Then came the citations. They handed out violation slips like parade confetti. Unauthorized development, illegal land use, breaking county code, improper allocation of HOA funds, failure to obtain permits, trespassing. But the worst of it hit Karen. They brought her a separate clipboard, thicker than the others. Her violations weren't casual mistakes. They were willful. Trespassing, illegal land appropriation, fraudulent public claims, misrepresentation of property boundaries, misuse of community funds, coercing HOA volunteers into participating, staging a public ceremony on land she did not control. Each line item made her shoulders sink lower. Her face, normally arranged into a smug, camera-ready smile, twisted into something between panic and disbelief. She tried to argue, tried to shift blame, tried to point at the HOA board. They were all part of this. They knew they signed off. One of the officials interrupted. "Ma'am, you filed all the paperwork alone." The crowd reacted instantly. A wave of whispers rippled through the onlookers. "She did this herself. She told us the owner moved away. This is fraud, actual real fraud." I knew something was off. She rushed this whole project. A woman near the front covered her mouth with both hands. Another neighbor pulled out their phone and began recording. Karen noticed and snapped, "You can't record this." The official answered calmly, "Ma'am, this is a public enforcement action." That shut her up so fast it was almost painful. Behind her, the HOA board began fracturing. Two members argued quietly. Another stepped away from the group entirely, pretending to check her car keys so she wouldn't be associated with the mess. The HOA treasurer, who once bragged about managing community resources like a professional, was now swiping sweat from his forehead as he realized county officials were auditing the budget records. Across the lawn, someone whispered, "This is better than reality TV." And honestly, they weren't wrong. The entire neighborhood watched as their once invincible HOA cracked open like an egg, spilling every secret, lie, and forged signature onto the grass. The board had strutted around for years, slapping fines, making demands, threatening homeowners. But now, their power evaporated. Their authority collapsed. Their credibility dissolved into the dirt. In the center of it all, Karen stood frozen, arms limp at her sides, mouth slightly open, staring at the stack of citations she now held with shaking hands. It looked heavier than it should have been. A final inspector walked past her and said quietly, almost sympathetically, "This is going to be a very long investigation." Karen didn't even blink. Behind her, neighbors kept whispering, soft, gleeful, stunned. Did she really try to steal land? She acted like she owned the whole neighborhood. She's done, completely done. And for the first time since I'd moved back, the entire community wasn't afraid of the HOA anymore. They were watching it fall apart, piece by piece, exactly the way it deserved. 1 week later, the county released their ruling, 12 pages long, stamped, sealed, and delivered to both me and the HOA with the kind of formality that said, "This is over. Completely, officially, undeniably over." I sat on my porch when the envelope arrived. Karen, meanwhile, received hers in front of the entire HOA board. The timing wasn't accidental. The county didn't just issue a verdict. They issued a message. And it started with a simple line. The HOA has been found at fault on all counts. From there, it just got worse for them. The damages. The first section listed the financial penalties. The HOA's attempt to claim and develop my land wasn't just a misunderstanding, as Karen had tried to argue. It was, according to the ruling, gross negligence, unauthorized construction, fraudulent representation of ownership, coercion of volunteers, illegal allocation of HOA funds. The dollar amount beneath it made my eyebrows rise. They owed me damages for disturbing my land, disrupting soil and landscape, staging events without permission, constructing illegal structures, violating property boundaries, trespassing repeatedly and knowingly. The number was big enough that the HOA treasurer reportedly excused himself to get water, and instead sat in his car with his head on the steering wheel for 10 straight minutes. The fines. Next came the county fines. Line after line of violations, each with its own penalty, each one directly tied to a person or action. Karen's name appeared a lot. Her individual fines dwarfed the rest of the boards combined. She tried to argue that the HOA board voted for this, but the county had receipts. Every permit request, every email, every signed form, every fake justification. All of it had Karen's handwriting. The county didn't even have to dig for evidence. They had footage. The restoration costs. Then came the most satisfying part. They had to restore my land to its original state. At their expense. Everything they built. The stay. The concrete sidewalk. The benches. The sign. The landscaping. The drone pads. Even the decorative lights. All of it now legally belonged to me. And they had to pay to remove every single thing that wasn't supposed to be there. But the catch. Anything removable was mine. Anything permanent had to be dismantled. Meaning, I now own their benches, their solar lights, their community park sign, their landscaping stones, their ornamental bushes. The HOA had basically bought me brand new lawn accessories. The irony tasted delicious. Karen's attempt to appeal. Karen filed an appeal the same afternoon the ruling came out. She marched into the county building wearing her blazer, clutching a stack of papers, acting like she was about to save the neighborhood with a heroic last stand. She didn't even make it 5 minutes. The judge glanced at the case file, then at the aerial photos, then at the video footage of her cutting a ribbon while standing on my land, announcing the HOA's new community park. The judge didn't even call for a recess. Appeal denied. Instantly. Karen didn't storm out. She didn't argue. She didn't even speak. She just lowered her head, walked straight past the reporters, and got into her car so quietly that people wondered if she was even breathing. The neighborhood reaction. That evening, the community message board lit up like a Christmas tree. Did you see the ruling? They have to pay what? I knew she was lying about that abandoned land. Can he build whatever he wants now? Karen finally met someone she couldn't bully. Some neighbors apologized privately. Some celebrated publicly. A few even asked whether I planned to build a park myself now that everything belonged to me. I didn't answer. Let them wonder. My favorite line in the entire ruling. Near the end of the document, one sentence stood out. Short. Clean. Beautiful. Video evidence confirms the property owner was not notified, did not consent, and was present to witness unauthorized occupation. In other words, their own ribbon-cutting ceremony destroyed them. Their photos, their drone footage, their live stream, their proud little event they posted online. All of it was evidence. All of it was proof. All of it was the reason they lost. Karen had effectively thrown herself under the legal bus while smiling for the camera. What the ruling really meant. It meant freedom. Freedom from HOA intimidation. Freedom from bogus claims. Freedom from Karen's crusade of control. But more than that, it meant I had full, unquestionable ownership. On record. On paper. And now in the minds of every neighbor. The HOA tried to take something that wasn't theirs. They ended up paying for it. And I walked away with my land, new assets, official county backing, and Karen's entire legacy collapsing in on itself. Not a bad outcome for a week that started with a stolen ceremony. The HOA declared war. The county delivered my victory. In the weeks after the county ruling, something strange happened. Something no one in the neighborhood ever expected. My land became the HOA's biggest financial burden. And my biggest source of income. It started with a single line buried in the county's final report. Any continued use of the land for community purposes will require annual land use compensation to the legal owner. Simple sentence. Massive consequences. The HOA board tried to negotiate. They tried to argue. They tried to guilt-trip the county, then me. Can't you reduce the amount? It's for the community. This affects everyone, not just you. I didn't budge. I didn't have to. The county had already calculated the fee based on the HOA's previous activities. Number of events, frequency of gatherings, amount of land disturbed, environmental impact, prior unauthorized construction, administrative overhead. The total, more than the HOA had ever spent on anything, including Karen's ridiculous Holiday Excellence Initiative, which once included a $4,000 artificial snow machine. The HOA treasurer nearly fainted when he saw the number. The HOA's new reality, because the land they had illegally tried to seize was now the centerpiece of their community, because all their future plans depended on that area by the creek, because their events calendar was already booked for the year. They had no choice. They had to pay me every single year, and the amount was so high. They had to raise HOA dues across the entire neighborhood. The announcement went out in an email one morning. Due to necessary land use fees related to community spaces, annual dues will increase by 25%. Within 30 seconds, the neighborhood group chat turned into a riot. Why are we paying for Karen's mistake? What land use fees? Didn't she say that land was abandoned? This is ridiculous. She should be the one paying, not us. Even better, some neighbors demanded Karen personally cover their dues increase. She responded by shutting off her phone for 2 days. My new routine. By the next month, I noticed something new happening. Whenever the HOA wanted to host something near the creek, a picnic, a yoga class, a gardening volunteer day, they were legally required to get my signature. Not electronically. Not by mail. In person. Which meant, every single week, someone from the HOA had to walk up the hill to my porch and stand there awkwardly holding paperwork. Sometimes it was the treasurer sweating through his shirt. Sometimes it was random volunteers who drew the short straw. Sometimes it was entire committees traveling in groups like they were headed to a funeral. But the funniest was always Karen. She avoided coming at all costs, but occasionally she couldn't dodge it. On those days, I'd see her from far away, walking stiffly, clutching a folder, trying to act like she wasn't being forced to grovel. She'd approach the porch steps, eyes glued to the papers, face tight with humiliation. Signature, she would mumble. I would take my time. Sometimes I'd sip my coffee first. Sometimes I'd read through every line, even though I already knew what it said. Sometimes I'd ask her to reprint it because the font was hard to read. She never argued. Not anymore. She just stood there, angry, quiet, and powerless. My land. My signature. My rules. The best part. The more the HOA used my land, the more they owed me annually. And because their entire community identity centered around that scenic creek area, they couldn't stop using it. It was the only part of the neighborhood people actually liked. Years ago, I had bought the land simply because it was beautiful, quiet, private, a place to escape. Now, that same place paid me more money than my full-time job used to. I often sat on my porch in the evenings, legs stretched out, watching the sun dip behind the valley, listening to the faint sounds of HOA committee members arguing in the distance about budgets. Life has a funny sense of humor. Karen's fall from power. Karen didn't resign. No, she clung to her title like it was the last lifeboat on a sinking ship. But authority is about perception. And everyone now saw her as the reason their dues had gone up. She couldn't boss people around anymore. couldn't issue random fines, couldn't threaten homeowners with violations. She had lost the one thing she valued most: fear. People didn't fear her now. They glared at her. She avoided eye contact whenever she passed me. Her once confident strut replaced by something careful, almost apologetic. The ruler of the neighborhood was now its cautionary tale. My land untouchable. After the county's ruling, I placed a boundary marker at the edge of my property. Not a fence, not a gate, just a subtle sign that read, "Private land, access by permission only." The irony. The HOA spent thousands of dollars designing signs that looked worse than mine. Every event now had a footnote: property access granted by private landowner. They were forced to say it publicly. Every single time. A constant reminder of who really owned the creek, who had the say, who held the power. My friend, still the governor, Daniel Governor Hayes, called me a few weeks later. "You enjoying your new revenue stream?" he joked. "More than you know," I said. He laughed. "Good, consider it a small reward for surviving the HOA. We've been friends since childhood, back when we fished in the same creek that the HOA tried to claim. Now, decades later, that same land became the reason they were paying me annually. Life really does come full circle." The final lesson. One evening, as I watched the HOA struggle to set up tables on land they no longer controlled, I couldn't help but smile. This entire disaster had started because Karen wanted a ribbon-cutting ceremony. Public recognition, power, attention. Instead, she gave me leverage, authority, income, and control she could never take back. The HOA learned a lesson they would never forget. Never hold a ribbon-cutting ceremony on land that doesn't belong to you, especially not mine.